Welcome back to the Owner Podcast. My name is Dion, and in today's episode, we are talking about buying near busy roads, under power lines, near freeways. Well, that's a busy road. Schools, you name it. We're going to talk about it because there's a lot of properties that I would consider compromised. Is it a bad decision? Is it a good decision? Are you taking advantage of something? Let's discuss it. Now, understanding compromise is important because not every property is perfect. Compromise, I look at it from two perspectives. There's compromises you can change and there's compromises you can't change. Let's talk about compromise you can change. Compromise you can change is things like a paint color, tapware, fixtures and fittings, a property getting renovated, a bad floor plan, expensive, but can be changed. And these are all things you can sort of look at from a glass half full perspective as value adders. That's how I look at them. I'm like, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to take a property that is compromised, which you can buy for less, add value to it, and then you've got a really good product. But there are properties with compromises that, unfortunately, unless you are very high up in government, you're most likely going to have absolutely zero ability to change. And those are things like busy roads, train lines, schools, power lines, things like that. Because often buyers will say, well, is it a good idea to buy something like that? The reality is you can buy in a suburb much further in to the city or in a much better area if you're buying with a compromise. Because the reality is it might have anywhere between a 5 to 20% effect on the price. Because of that, you can get it to a better area because you're buying properties for a 5 to 20% discount. But is that a good thing? It really depends. It depends on what you want. If you want to be closer in, you might be prepared to take that compromise, but you have to go into it eyes wide open. The most important thing to understand is there's always a ceiling that your property will have. If you can't change that compromise, then there is no ability for that compromise to go away. When you sell your property, you will also sell for less. So there's a saying, buy cheap, sell cheap. And so as long as you go into it knowing that there is the possibility that in the future your property is not going to perform as well and not going to sort of appeal to as many demographics, then that is okay. Now, there's compromises like main road, which I would say would be less of a concern, especially depending what asset you buy. Like if you buy an apartment, most likely it's going to be on a busier road. So that's less of a concern, not something you so much have to worry about. And you can do things like change the glazing on your window and insulate the property as much as possible to try soundproof it. But the main road is not going to go away. It's not always sound related. It might be people wanting to sort of have more privacy or people wanting to be sort of that might have sort of security concerns or things like that that also be worried about that. So you can't always sort of overcome the objection by sort of trying to change things like that. If you're on a main road, you're on a main road. Now, train lines are also an interesting one because everyone wants to be close to public transport, but no one wants to be sort of on the public transport's doorstep. And so again, with train lines, you have to understand that yes, it's great to be close to a train, but being too close to a train is obviously going to have an impact on price. If you buy backing onto a train line, it will have a massive impact on price. Again, it doesn't matter how much double glazing or triple glazing you do on the windows, you will always have a restriction when it comes to price. I'm currently jumping into today's episode just to ask a massive favor. If you could please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, back to today's episode. But the biggest compromise, I would say, is buying under power lines. That's, I'm not here. I'm definitely not a health expert. I'm never going to claim to be a health expert, but there are so many people that are going to have different opinions about sort of health and safety when it comes to power lines. All the other ones are sort of inconveniences, like being close to a school, bit of an inconvenience, being close to a main road or sort of backing onto a train line. It's sort of not ideal, but they're sort of easier to overcome from a buyer's perspective. When it comes to power lines, there are so many different opinions out there about sort of the health and sort of all of the long-term impacts about buying close to power lines. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter because it still has an effect on what buyers think. And so because of that, you're always going to limit your buying pool massively. If you're buying directly under power lines, you could even have up to like a 30 or 40% discount. That is something that's never, ever going to go away. And that is a massive impact. So yes, you can buy for less, but you're going to be selling for less as well. It's all relative, right? So I think it's sort of a very dangerous sort of buyer mindset to go around trying to buy the cheapest property in a suburb, because if you go around buying the cheapest property in a suburb, you're going to always come across things like this where you've got massive sort of compromise, and that is always going to have a long-term impact on your property. So I say all this, buying sort of next to a main road, it's not the biggest deal breaker around, and plenty of people do it. And there's plenty of great properties on main roads. It's just, of course, in a sort of a side street, in a nice street, it's going to perform better. Buying on a train track, again, not ideal. Buying across from a train station, probably not ideal. But a couple streets away, extremely attractive. Buying near a school, again, it depends who the buyer is. If you wake up and if you work from 8 a.m. and you work to 6, that's never going to be an issue for you. But if you're staying at home during school hours, well, there's going to be more noise. But then again, they're great neighbors to have on the weekend because they're never going to have a party. They're not going to have 18th or 21st. So it's all about how you sort of look at it. But the power lines, that is definitely a compromise that sort of, for a lot of my clients, I would sort of say to them straight away, I don't feel comfortable buying near it. I just think there's too much risk associated with it. I hope that helps sort of clarify power lines, main roads, all of that, because it's a really common question I get. In next week's episode, we're going to be talking about the sort of the 80-20 rule for property, what's actually really important and what's not. Have a great week or fortnight, because we'll catch you next episode. Talk to you then.